There was a time when one blue globe meant the entire world. It was stamped on ticket counters from New York to Hong Kong, painted on the tail of the first jumbo jet ever built, printed on flight bags carried like status symbols through 100 airports. When Hollywood wanted to show the future, a spinning space station orbiting the Earth in a film set in the year 2001, they put that same blue globe on the side of the shuttle. Because everyone understood the message instantly, this is the airline that flies everywhere, even to space. And then one morning, it was gone. On December 4, 1991, the planes were told to stop where they were. Crews walked off. The globe came down from 100 counters. The most famous airline on Earth, the one that had, quite literally, taught the world how to fly across oceans, simply ceased to exist. Not slowly. Not quietly. All at once. So how does a company that owns the sky run out of ground beneath it? Stay with me, because the thing that killed this airline wasn't bad luck. It was the exact same daring that once made it a god. To understand the fall, you have to understand just how high this thing flew. It began in 1927 with a single mail route and one ferociously ambitious man named Juan Trippe. Trippe didn't want to run an airline. He wanted to run the airline, the flag carrier of an entire country, before the country had even asked for one. And he did something no rival dared. While others hugged the coastlines, Trippe pointed his planes straight out over open water. In the 1930s, his flying boats, the famous Clippers, crossed the Pacific Ocean, hopping island to island, connecting California to Asia when the idea of a passenger flying that far still sounded like science fiction. This was an era when most people had never been on an airplane at all, and Pan Am was selling them the entire planet. Trippe built it into something stranger than a business. Because American law kept domestic airlines domestic, Pan Am became the only major U.S. carrier allowed to fly the great international routes. It was a private company acting like a national institution, an unofficial arm of American power abroad. Ambassadors flew Pan Am. Presidents flew Pan Am. When you landed in a distant capital, the blue globe was often the first piece of America you saw. And Trippe was just getting started. Here is what made Pan Am legendary and what would eventually destroy it. Trippe had one instinct above all others: be first, buy biggest, and force the future to arrive on your schedule. In 1958, Pan Am launched the Boeing 707 across the Atlantic, and the jet age truly began, cutting the crossing to a matter of hours and turning oceans into afternoon trips. Overnight, propeller travel looked ancient. Pan Am had done it first, and the world followed. But the 707 was only the warm-up. In the mid-1960s, Trippe went to Boeing with an idea so large it barely made sense. He wanted a plane more than twice the size of anything flying, a machine that could carry hundreds of passengers at once. Boeing didn't even have a factory big enough to build it. So they built the factory too. In 1966, Pan Am placed an order for 25 of these giants, the Boeing 747, and effectively willed the jumbo jet into existence. It was the boldest bet in aviation history. Trippe was betting that demand for air travel would keep exploding forever, and that the airline with the most seats in the sky would own the future. For a brief, glorious moment, it looked exactly right. The 747 entered service in 1970, and the Blue Globe now flew the biggest, most famous aircraft on Earth. Pan Am hadn't just joined the future. It had ordered it, wholesale, in advance. And that advance order is where the story quietly turns. Watch closely, because this is the trap. The 747 was designed for a world of endless, ever-rising demand. But the jumbo arrived into a decade that had other plans. Almost as soon as those enormous planes started flying, the ground shifted. In 1973, an oil crisis sent fuel prices soaring, and fuel is the single largest cost of flying. Suddenly Pan Am was operating the thirstiest, most expensive aircraft ever built at the exact moment fuel became painfully dear. And those giant cabins, designed to be filled to the brim, were flying across the Atlantic half empty as the economy sagged. A plane that only makes money when it's full becomes a bleeding wound when it isn't. Pan Am had built its whole identity on scale, the most seats, the biggest planes, the longest routes. But scale is a magnificent servant and a merciless master. When the boom continues, size is a fortress. When the boom pauses, size is an anchor. Every empty seat on every jumbo was a fixed cost that didn't care about the economy. The company that had bet on more was now trapped inside its own ambition, hauling steel through the sky with nobody to fill it. And there was a deeper flaw hiding underneath, one written into Pan Am's very DNA. Here's the paradox that doomed it. Pan Am flew everywhere on Earth except across its own country. For decades, U.S. regulation had made it purely an international carrier, with almost no domestic routes at home. That had been a gift for half a century. But it meant Pan Am had no network of short domestic flights feeding passengers into its big international ones. Rivals could carry you from a small American city to a hub, then hand you off to their own overseas flight, start to finish, one airline. Pan Am could only grab you at the ocean's edge. Then, in 1978, the United States deregulated its airlines. The protected world trip had vanished. Now anyone could fly almost anywhere, competition exploded, and fares were slashed. And Pan Am, the international giant with no domestic base, was suddenly exposed. Its answer was another bold, expensive swing. In 1980, it bought national airlines to finally get those domestic routes, winning a bidding war that drove the price sky high. But the two airlines fit together badly, different fleets, different cultures, a painful and costly merger. Pan Am had paid a fortune for a home, and the home didn't work. The daring that once made it unstoppable was now just making its losses larger. The empire was starting to sell off its own furniture to pay the bills. This is where a giant learns the cruelest lesson: you can sell your greatest assets exactly once. Bleeding cash, Pan Am began dismantling the very things that made it Pan Am. In 1981, it sold its gleaming headquarters skyscraper in the heart of Manhattan, the Pan Am building, its name over the New York skyline. In 1985, desperate for cash, it sold its prized Pacific routes, the very transocean crossing strip had pioneered 50 years earlier, to a rival. Piece by piece, the globe was shrinking. Each sale bought a little more time and made the next year harder, because the assets sold were the ones that earned the money. Then came the blow no balance sheet could survive. On December 21, 1988, a Pan Am jumbo was destroyed by a bomb over Lockerbie, Scotland, killing all aboard and 11 people on the ground, 270 lives in total. It was a horror first, a tragedy measured in families. But it also shattered what little confidence in the brand remained. Travelers grew afraid, bookings fell, and lawsuits and security costs piled onto an airline already gasping. By 1991, the end was mechanical. In January, Pan Am filed for bankruptcy protection. It kept selling its cherished Atlantic routes, and its London slots went to competitors that year. And on December 4, 1991, with a final deal collapsing, the order came to stop the planes. 64 years after that first mail flight, the Blue Globe was pulled from the sky for good. So what actually killed Pan Am? Not one thing. Oil shocks, deregulation, a costly merger, and active terror, any one of them was survivable. Together they were not. But underneath every blow is a single, deeper cause, and it's the reason this story still matters. Pan Am died of its own boldness. The instinct to always be first to cross the ocean, first into the jet age, first to order the jumbo, is exactly what built the legend. And it is exactly what left the company overextended, oversized, and dangerously exposed when the world stopped cooperating. Being first is thrilling. It is also the most expensive seat in the house. You pay to build the factory, you pay to fly the empty jumbo, you pay for the future to arrive before the demand does. Tripp's genius was seeing tomorrow. His tragedy was betting the entire company that tomorrow would always look like more of today. It never does. The lesson buried in that Blue Globe is quiet but ruthless. The daring that makes an empire is not the same skill that keeps one alive. Pioneers open the frontier. They rarely get to keep it. So the next time you watch a company race to be first at any cost, bigger, bolder, further than anyone, remember the airline that flew higher than everyone else, and ask the question almost nobody asks at the top: what happens if the sky stops rising? Which fearless giant of today do you think is flying its own jumbo into an empty sky? Tell me in the comments, I read them.